All right, I am live. Let me know if you can hear me. I did literally everything I could possibly do on my end to remove variables that could have been causing crashes. So let's see if this works this time. And, let's aim for the bushes on this one, jumping off the building. If anyone's seen the other guys. And I am drinking sake early. Was going to start halfway through the stream, but I'm stressed out already. So I don't know what that was again. I feel like it could have been the internet. It could have been YouTube. It could have been the cam link that could be breaking. That thing's been unreliable. Not the camera itself, but the link that it uses. Let's hope this time works. I switched internet. I switched cameras. That's why the quality won't be quite as good as before. But, we're just going to have to hope this works. Anyways, let's get into it. We've wasted 30 minutes. First thing I'm going to talk about is more upgrades to the Moore's Law is Dead platform. So as you'll probably have noticed, a die shrink came out today. If you support me at the $2 level, the unlocked edition multiplier level, you get to ask questions of guests. You get die shrink. The one today was about the future of work and what jobs automation may eliminate. I thought it was one of our best die shrinks. So again, that's all it takes to support that. I'm also adding a new exclusive podcast called Hits and Gems. It's kind of a behind the scenes kind of repackaging of previous videos into an audio format if it works. And additionally, I will be relaunching Flyover State soon. I have 2 guests lined up. One of them is a woman who climbed up the corporate ladder in the 80s. Another one is someone who works with a lot of new manufacturing technology and used to live in America but moved to Sweden. And I've got several other people lined up as well. So if you like, more conversational politics and stuff like that, that's what that will be. The point is this. I'm turning the unlocked 4th core tier into kind of a subscription delivery service where there's always an ad-free early episode of Broken Silicon on the first half of the week. And then on a Friday, there's going to either be a die shrink, flyover states, or a hits and gems. And then there will also be other features as well. I'm basically turning this into its own full content factory. So if you're not supporting us yet, please consider it. Ask people if they think die shrink's good. I think pretty much everyone thinks that. But I just had to make that announcement right away. And do subscribe to Flyover States, both the YouTube channel or the RSS feed, because I've got a band, Spark Alaska, that's going to be providing the music now. When I say I'm relaunching Flyover States, I'm really relaunching it, and it's going to be bigger and better than ever. Anyways, let us get to the information there. Yeah, 3rd time's the charm for the stream, Metroid Child, when you remove every variable 3 times. Jesus. So anyways, though, I guess the other announcement I'll make, I was going to put this in Broken Silicon, but I figure I'll do it here, is I have to be upfront about, how do I put this, the communication I can do on a fan-by-fan basis. So recently I had a patron reach out to me and ask me to start benchmarking stuff for him and troubleshoot his problems. And I told him that I have similar hardware and I don't have those problems and that I don't think it's related to what he was saying. I even did run the benchmark and tell him, hey, man, I don't think it's the drivers and I'm not sure it's your graphics card. It could be a litany of different things. And frankly, even if I have similar hardware to you, let's say I have the same graphics card, right? Just because I have the same graphics card and then I can run a benchmark without problems and you can't, that doesn't really prove anything. We don't have the same motherboard, processor, maybe not the same edition of Windows. Me doing this stuff for you doesn't prove anything. And it didn't seem to matter how much I helped him, but he, of course, got mad at me. And I was like, I should have ignored him, unfortunately. And I knew it was coming, so then he just stopped supporting me on Patreon. So I'm just making this announcement here. I can't troubleshoot your problems for you. And so from now on, I'm going to ignore those requests. And it's unfortunate when someone ruins this for everyone else, but that's what I'm going to have to do. If you ask me to run a benchmark for you or download some program and make sure it works, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to interview guests. I'm here to make podcasts. I'm here to make YouTube videos. My job is not to be your friend, unfortunately, and my job is not there to solve your problems. So don't send me emails asking me to help you with a problem with your PC, because frankly, I can't help you unless I'm there. Let's be honest. So, and also, if you were a patron, you could have posted your problem on the Discord, and there would have been hundreds of people who could have helped you much quicker than I could have. And in fact, it delayed me getting a video out. So again, I'm sorry. I'm just, do not send any type of, if you send anything that includes, I have this problem. Again, I'm not talking about general stuff. I'm not talking about, what do you think about the state of AMD's drivers? You know, do you think that driver is stable? Do you think this is this thing's fault? You know, Nvidia had this graphics card, had this problem. Is it a hardware bug? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, do not send me a thing and ask if I'm having that technical issue, because I'm just going to ignore that forever now, because I lost a patron because I didn't help them enough. I didn't want to have to talk about that, and that's why I kept it out of the broken silicon, but I have to talk about it here. So, and again, you know, so I lost that patron, but there's a lot of content if you want to support me. All right, so that's the business stuff in the beginning. Now let's move on to, oh, and again, this is loose ends, guys. Don't send me the questions right now. I'm going to get through all of the Patreon questions and address news stories that apply to the videos I've released this month first. So I'm saying in like 10 or 15 minutes, you can live chat with Q&A. And if you tip me, I'll respond to you immediately. If you don't, I'm just going to randomly pick questions. So again, hold your questions. Hold them for like 10, 15 minutes. Anyways, though, things from this month. Intel Z. Well, as luck would have it, right, Adore did a video about this, so that's actually interesting. I did a video that YouTube, for some reason, didn't promote really at all, and it was about Intel's Big Z, and this was based on insider information. And so this is, first of all, kind of a plug for my Intel Big Z leak that I posted, and as far as I can tell, didn't appear anywhere. I had several people reach out to me and say, wait, I didn't even know this video came out. Yeah, I don't know why. It's there, though, and I put it in the best video section on the YouTube page. Watch that if you want to know what I think Intel may be able to do with Z. And what I think they could do is scale it up to compete in the low end, in the lower mid-range, late next year. Late next year. And what I'm told is they do plan to use 10 nanometer. And I've had enough sources for months tell me, no, guys, really, Intel plans to use 10 nanometer, that's just the plan. And I'm sure they are holding 7 nanometer in reserve, especially at TSMC, if that all goes to shit, which it might. Especially, and really, you know, that adored article about, or leak about DG2 being on 7 nanometer. The way I interpreted it as, look, Intel wants to get to their own 7 nanometer in 2021, but let's be honest here. That's probably not going to happen, guys. I think 10 nanometer this year will start to become a real node at the end of the year. I find it hard to believe their 7 nanometer will be fully functional, shall we say, in 2021. So I'm sure Intel's holding TSMC, possibly Samsung 7 nanometer as a backup if they can't get their 7 nanometer working on time. That's what I took away from Adored's 7 nanometer DG2 leak, personally. And Intel would be an idiot to not do that based on recent stuff, right? So that's what I take away from that. But anyways, as far as I'm aware, Z should be able to scale up to the lower end. And again, a big part of that Z video was updates on Alder Lake, Golden Cove, and Tiger Lake. And I do think Tiger Lake will be impressive. All information I've received is Tiger Lake is going to be good. It should have almost fixed clock speeds. So we're talking, you know, Comet Lake clock speeds or close. Fixed power usage, and the graphics should be twice as good as Ice Lake. Now, look, it's competing with Renoir, and Renoir is way more impressive than I think a lot of people expected. So I'm not saying Tiger Lake's going to be better than Renoir, but I do think it could compete with it well. And that brings me to the other thing from this month I really want to keep talking about, and that's NVIDIA's place in the laptop market. So where is it? It should be right here. Yeah, so I have this laptop here. It has an MX250 and a Whiskey Lake i7. This MX250 only uses 10 watts, and I can play Sekiro in medium settings in 900p, even at like 50 frames a second, you know, bouncing between 45 and 60. That's insanely impressive for something smaller than what used to be called a netbook. You know, I know it's only, I know it's 13 inches, but you have to look at the bezels on netbooks in the past. Netbooks used to have giant bezels, and my first one was bigger than this. And the fact that I can, this is about the performance of an Xbox One base, and I can just, you know, game on battery is amazing to me. And I think this used to be an important place for NVIDIA. I remember when Zen 1 APUs first started coming out, I thought to myself, well, NVIDIA's out of the laptop market, at least besides the high end, right? I think we all assume that. But then they announced the MX150, a 74 millimeter squared graphics card that was an underclocked GT 1030. Now, the MX250 is equivalent to a GT 1030. That's a 750 Ti. That's an Xbox One base and performance. So yeah, I mean, if NVIDIA can pump out 70, I mean, that's tiny. That's absolutely nothing. Anyone, HP can just put that on. It literally shares the same heatsink as the processor. Like, they can put that into any notebook if it's that small. And being that small of a die, guess what? It costs them like 20 bucks to make. The RAM probably costs as much as the die itself. Like 2 gigabytes of GDR5, that die, it's like a 20, they could probably sell it for 30 bucks or something when it first came out. I'm sure it's even cheaper now. And guess what? It outperforms AMD's APUs by about 20%, while not being throttled when the processor is being used, at least not as much. And so when I saw the MX150, what my point is, I was like, well, you know what? NVIDIA changed the game again. If they can make these smaller graphics cards, then perhaps they're not going to be pushed out of the market. But what did they do? You know, the MX150 came out in, when was it, right? It would have been like 2017, I believe. And they should have had a Turing replacement in 2019, but they didn't. They just refreshed the MX150. It was about 20% better, legitimately about 20% better. Don't get me wrong. It was better. But Turing had been out for months. And if you look at the dies, they could have made a 512 CUDA core. The MX150 has 384. Turing, though, 512 Turing cores on 100 millimeters squared. And I think that would have been around a 1050. And they could have put a single 64-bit interface on a 4 gigabyte GDR6 chip. And that would have been enough. 4 gigabytes of RAM, the same bandwidth as a 1050 Ti, probably around the same performance as a 1050 Ti, except it's a 100 millimeter square graphics card that they could have just slotted right in. But they got cocky. I think they thought they wouldn't need that. They underestimated Renoir. And because of that, I think they could get entirely pushed out of the laptop market. And if you'll notice from Adored's video today, he says that he also expects Tiger Lake to be pretty good. And that Intel's straight up telling OEMs, you don't need MX250s anymore. Tiger Lake is, well, Tiger Lake could end up being 50% better, right? It could be close to a 1050. Probably not quite, but close. And if that's the case, NVIDIA just lost that entire market. It was a high volume market. And think about it. If someone buys a laptop, a budget laptop that's $500 with an MX150, MX250, 25 watt version, that might be what they get then. But eventually they might get a better job, make more money. And they already had an NVIDIA graphics card. They'll want to upgrade to another laptop with an NVIDIA graphics card. It's just kind of what a lot of people do. I had a predilection to get the MX350 or 450 in my next laptop if they could hit another home run. But now that I see that they're making this MX350, which is some bastardized version of a 1050, I don't know. I do not think they'll be able to get that down to 10 watts. It'll take up more space, and it'll underperform Renoir and Tiger Lake. Right? So I think that was a mistake on NVIDIA's end. And I don't think it's this matter of, you know, they didn't need it or they're focusing on that. The 1650 is too big. It's too big to fit in there. It's 200 millimeters squared. It's almost the same size as Navi, guys. I mean, come on. What a joke. Like, you can't fit that in the same laptops. So I think they missed out, and they're going to just lose a large, high-volume market. And frankly, you know, I don't know why they couldn't have made a GT 1630 with a TU118 die that would have outperformed the 1050 Ti and sold it for $100. Again, just complete missed opportunity in my eyes. I really liked that video I made there. Anyways, I've talked about this way too long. Let us move on to the Ampere video, which I have some lingering thoughts about as well. So there was that leak showing a 320-bit, what was it, GA103, I think, die. And a lot of people were talking about how that's weird. Well, I mean, first of all, NVIDIA's made 320-bit dies before, and everyone assumed that the 320-bit die was the next 3080 Ti, I suppose, and not the 3080. And that could certainly be true. That could certainly be true that NVIDIA is getting even more grubby. They're making a 3080 Ti 320-bit instead of 384 or 352-bit. That could definitely be true. But I wouldn't underestimate the fact that, no, NVIDIA may actually be upping their game. And here's why. Why did NVIDIA probably, what was one of the main reasons NVIDIA didn't make a TU118? They probably thought they could get on 7 nanometer sooner. They didn't count for AMD buying up all of TSMC's capacity. They also didn't account for Samsung stalling on their 7 nanometer EUV. I think NVIDIA planned to use Samsung and then maybe TSMC as a backup a while ago. But then AMD buys up all of TSMC's capacity, and Samsung just isn't as good as TSMC, at least not yet. I know they're spending like $100 billion on their foundries. And so what I'm saying is I don't think Ampere is coming out until late this year. Now, I know. They're supposedly having professional cards come out this summer. What does that mean, this summer? This summer could be August. This summer could be September. And that's the professional cards. Anyone remember Turing? NVIDIA showed off their professional Turing cards months before announcing the RTX series. So if they're coming out summer, I don't know. I think Ampere comes out at the end of 2020. Why else are they preparing to launch super refreshes of their mobile graphics cards? If they're preparing to refresh not just the MX350 on Pascal, but this like 1650, I don't know, Ti and Super and all these BS like 2080 Super laptop cards, does that sound like the actions of someone who has a new generation right around the corner? No, it doesn't. It's a year away, guys. So that's what I want to stress. And I do think Big Navi will come out before the end of the year, before Ampere. With that mindset, with the knowledge that AMD's probably going to have a lot of clout with developers with the launch of these next-gen consoles based on RDNA, I think NVIDIA may be aggressive. And I think they have to be aggressive. And that is why I would not discount that instead of being 256-bit again, the 3080 could be 320-bit. And it might even have 20 gigabytes of RAM. And here's why it might have 20 gigabytes of RAM. The PS5 is probably going to have 20 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes of GDR6, 4 gigabytes of DDR4. Although there's been rumors they may go 320-bit as well, by the way, which I think would be perfect for a console. Do you want Sony or Microsoft, or both, to be able to walk on stage at E3, show off their new consoles and say, this has more memory than a 3080? Do you think NVIDIA wants that? Sony to be able to market that their console has more RAM than NVIDIA's flagship? I don't know, guys. If I was NVIDIA, I think that would make us look pretty stupid. So do not discount the possibility that NVIDIA may just like way go all out with their graphics, because they cannot afford to lose the gamer market. That is their market. They cannot afford to lose it, and AMD is resurgent. Having said that, I don't know, right? I think there's almost no chance, right? Because if it's 320-bit, I don't think they're gonna, I think the worst case scenario isn't true. I don't think they're preparing a 10 gigabyte 3080 Ti. I think at least 20 gigabyte 3080 Ti, or some kind of 384-bit bus, 12 or 24, and then a 10 gigabyte stronger than a 2080 Ti 3080 for like $700. That's what I expect from NVIDIA, and it's because it's coming out in a year and it needs to compete with a lot of competition by the time it actually gets out. And if I was NVIDIA, I would want to earn back gamers' respect after Turing. I know some people say Turing's it isn't. Turing is not a success like Pascal is. And they really need that money. And again, for the people who doubt why would a graphics card need 20 gigabytes of RAM, I mean, I don't know, like My Radeon 7 is 16 gigabytes. Big Navi will probably get up to 16. Why would it not? It's coming out after Big Navi, and the consoles will probably have at least 16 gigs, at least. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to have enough memory to compete with the consoles. But anyways, let us move on. And now that I'm talking about the consoles, this gets us into one of my big videos too of this month, and that was the No Fanboys for You video about the next gen consoles and exclusives. I want to be clear about that because some people thought I was saying exclusives aren't important. That's not what I'm saying. What I said is that Microsoft is clearly moving towards integrating Xbox into PC, which they should, because for fuck's sakes, this is a Windows company. If they're not making a good Windows device, what are they doing? Now, maybe they won't. Maybe the Xbox won't run Windows. I think some version of full Windows that can run Steam and Origin and stuff. I think that would be a mistake if they didn't do that, or at least something close to that. But at the very least, they're going to probably do more and more integration between PC and Xbox. They're going to probably bring some Xbox exclusives to PlayStation and especially Switch. And PlayStation is not just going to get rid of all of their exclusives, guys. They've dozens. What I'm saying is there will be some games they probably bring to PC, and they already have, and the world didn't end. To the people that are PlayStation fanboys and worry about that, they've already brought Journey to PC, Detroit Become Human. I know that's not a first-party game, but they've brought exclusives to MLB The Show is coming multi-platform. There's going to be select games Sony brings. I'm not saying exclusives aren't important. I'm just saying it doesn't matter at all if they bring 5 out of 100 games to PC. That doesn't affect their argument that they have the most games at all. Like at all. It really just acts as an ad to get a PlayStation, right? That's all it would be. It's like, oh, you like that game? Look at all these other ones that you can get right now. That's their argument, guys. Their exclusives aren't going anywhere. Anyways, though, the other thing I want to add to that is that I really think there's some big misconceptions going on with the performance of the next gen consoles, right? So all information points to their graphics performance being roughly the same, and their processor, of course, being Zen 2 the same. But the more information I receive, the more it seems like the PS5 does have more RAM, does have better memory. And it's not just better memory. Like, I'm talking about an SSD that they had conceived of like 3 or 4 years ago. I'm talking about something that I received, and I suspected that for over a year if you go back to my older videos. I received information a couple months ago that showed information that Sony had designed this 3 years ago. And so I'm going to cover this in another video. But I think what happened with the PS5 is this. I guess I'll tell you guys now to explain where I'm coming from here. I think the PS5 was initially conceived to possibly come out in 2019. And that makes sense. I mean, that's 6 years, right, after the PS4 came out. That's a console generation. And it was going to be around RX 5700 XT performance. It was going to have the same custom SSD it will have now, but it was going to be 1 terabyte instead of more than a terabyte, I think. And it was going to have, I don't know, right, 16 gigabytes of GDR6. What I think happened is somewhere mid-2018, they decided that we're about to hit the uncanny valley. And if we're about to hit the uncanny valley, all we got to do is get to just the right level of performance, and we don't really need to upgrade the performance for a long time. Also, ray tracing is coming out, and I bet they caught wind that the Xbox is going for a high level of performance. And so they said, you know what? We were going to launch in 2019 for $400 with 20 gigabytes of RAM total and a 1 terabyte SSD that we custom designed. But let's give it a year. Let's get faster memory. Let's get more memory. Let's make the hard drive bigger, and let's beef up the graphics card a bit and add a ray tracing chip. That's what I think's going on. The ray tracing chip is still elusive. All we know is they've confirmed they have it. But they have beefed it up. That's my point. And I've seen a lot of people go, well, graphics don't matter anymore, and this. Well, if you don't think graphics are going to be that important, then what should you focus on? Load times, features, VR? Well, that's what Sony's focusing on. They're focusing on instant load times. They're focusing on ease of use. They're focusing on you boot up the console. There is no boot up. It's just on. You download the game instantly, and it instantly is in the game. They want to be next-gen loading performance and superior, and they want to focus on VR too. So I think the people just ignoring this, it's not about teraflops, guys. And let's be honest about this. 10 teraflops, 12 teraflops, it's not going to make a fucking difference. In fact, most devs already said they're programming for the PlayStation 5 first. So what would be likely to happen if the Xbox is 10% more teraflops, which is what the rumor is right now, by the way? They'll just make it on PlayStation, port it, and leave it alone. Like, it's not going to make any graphical difference. What matters is load times, ease of use, and games. That's what Sony's focusing on. And I think Microsoft will succeed on its own, not if it tries to be a Me Too PlayStation. Like, we're also like PlayStation, but we have 10% more teraflops. I think Xbox will succeed if they merge Xbox into PC in a way that really allows them to capture the PC gaming market. That's how you succeed. You don't succeed copying people. Look at the Switch. Doing way better than the Wii U and other consoles they made. Why? Because they did their own thing. They didn't try to copy the competition. You're not going to beat PlayStation at its own game, but you can make your own market. Anyways, that's my point. I think I've explained that, and I have a lot of console questions here and stuff. So let's get to the Patreon questions quick. Anyways, Carbon Cry writes in, and he says, with the Gamer Nexus video about logistics of GPU manufacturing, I had a thought. How has the relationship between AMD and Nvidia and AIBs changed over the years? Did the timetables become more strained? If so, I think they have. Although it depends, right? There's been multiple generations in the past that had AIBs get the final specs for a GPU way last minute, and then they had to rush them out the door. And lastly, could this be the cause for a lack of any interesting AIB designs? After all, if they barely get enough time for slightly modified PCBs, how could they develop something wilder? Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it comes down to a few things, and I've done a podcast on this, right? I did a podcast on interesting AIB cards. Like, when I got into PC gaming, there were so many interesting AIB cards. Like, we had low-profile HD7850s, which would be the equivalent of a low-profile single 6-pin 5700. That's incredible, right? That would be amazing if we could get a low-profile version, which if they really wanted to make one, they probably could, actually. They probably have to give it 4 gigabytes of RAM or something to fit it on there, but they probably could. You know, why aren't we seeing this stuff? And I think it's just come down to AIBs are focusing on what sells, and what sells are big, fat graphics cards with lights all over them. Except I also think a lot of people are desperate for more professional-looking cards. So I was about to make a really weird analogy. I'm not going to. But anyways, the point I'm making is I think a lot of it is just them trying to follow the trends and realizing that just focusing on what they keep doing is probably the best for the bottom line. And I hope that changes. I want more interesting AIB cards. Like, again, we used to get, there was a GTX 760 X2, a dual 760 card made by Asus. They just made that. And it was, you know, $700, and they marketed it as being stronger than a Titan. That's interesting, you know. But it probably didn't sell that well, you know. And I think that's what the main drive of this is, right? That's what I think is causing this. Is just realizing they just need to get something out and focus on what works well. The one thing I'll say is it does feel like, I don't know, I'm actually of two minds about this. I feel like some AIBs have more reliable, better cooling cards now, but I also think some of their fans break faster than they ever used to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't remember AIB cards having their fans break so quickly. But I don't know. Just my 2 cents on that, Carbon Crime. All right, Chicago Fire writes in, and he says, for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, how do you think their Zen implementation will differ from desktop, if at all? Well, I think at the very least they'll have the efficiency improvements that you got in Renoir, right? I know that the Xbox was considering Zen 3 for a while, but I'm not entirely sure how many of those enhancements will be worked into the consoles. I'm not sure. It's something they could somewhat make last minute, but then again, not really. I mean, look at the Xbox. They've already taped it out, and it's a 400 millimeter squared monolithic die. They can't just change that to Zen 2 or Zen 3, I mean, right? So I don't know. I assume it's just made on normal 7 nanometers. So I think it's going to have some enhancements from Renoir and some custom things. Like, for instance, I know the PlayStation will have its own custom tweaks like it always does, but I don't think it's Zen 3 anymore. And I haven't really thought that for a while. Although I still wouldn't rule out specific enhancements that they bring from other architectures into it. It's just on what they decide to use. All right. Fatboy Diesel writes in and he says, I have a 3-part question since you mentioned the Wii DS era versus the Switch in broken silicon. For those who don't know, I pointed out how well the Switch is very successful. You guys got to remember that it's their only console right now. I mean, I know the 3DS is technically still for sale in Japan and some regions, I think. But let's be honest, the Switch replaced both the Wii U and the 3DS. And the 3DS sold half as many as the DS. And the Wii U sold, I don't know, a ninth as many as the Wii. So that sounds bad, but if you combined the Wii U sales to the 3DS's sales, you're still looking at like 80, 90 million total. I think the Switch could hit that, but it's a far cry from the 100 million plus of the Wii and the 150 million, maybe, I don't even remember, was it 160 million of the DS? So if you combine those, that's like 200 and, let's call it 250 million consoles sold. I don't think the Switch is hitting that. And that's why I bring that up, is it's like, let's see how well the Switch keeps selling, because the Wii DS era was substantial, and this is replacing both consoles. Technically, it hasn't even eclipsed the Wii U plus 3DS. I think it will, but if it does, it might not do it by that much. That's why I got to point that out. But he says, what's your take on a recent news about the Switch surpassing lifetime SNES sales? Well, it doesn't surprise me. The Switch was a well-designed, a well-conceived device. And then he says, do you think it will surpass the NES? 62 million? Yeah, I definitely think it will pass the NES. This year? Let me see. He says 19, they sold 18 million. Probably, yeah. Probably. I think probably it will. I don't know. I've heard they're planning to launch some kind of super Switch, which I think they should do. I think this is the path forward for them if they're going to continue to make their own consoles, which I do think they should. I think Nintendo should continue to make their own consoles. When I talk about them bringing their games multi-platform, I think of it kind of like a more aggressive strategy than Sony's about to take. Bring more of them to multi-platform than Sony will, but still make your own console that can be a portable device for kids and stuff that runs the newest games. That's what I think Nintendo should do anyways. And then he goes on. If so, would you think approaching Wii lifetime sales numbers would incentivize Nvidia and Nintendo to work on a more powerful and efficient SoC to compete against Sony and Microsoft's next-gen consoles? Yeah, of course it would incentivize that. Although I gotta say, I really think people are underestimating how much better the next-gen consoles are going to be compared to everything, and, which means especially the Switch. Like, you're not porting any PS5 games that are natively designed for the PS5 to the Switch. Like, you just straight up can't do it, right? They're talking about an SSD that can work as backup RAM, potentially. Like, that level of performance. And then this comes in at a time where you have to keep in mind, most games are still built for hard drives, both because of the consoles and because of SATA SSDs on PC. The standard drive on a gaming PC is still a SATA solid state drive. And that's like 1/6 the speed of a Gen 3 SSD. If you go look up benchmarks, like Battlefield 5 loads like what, 30% faster with a Gen 3 SSD over a SATA one? That's like 6 times the speed and you're only getting a 30% boost? I don't know, right? Isn't that weird? Like, and then Gen 4 is like double that performance and that. on average, right? I know there's some Gen 3 SSDs that are close to Gen 4, but roughly speaking, it's twice as fast. So, like, for all intents and purposes, game engines aren't even built to use SSDs yet. And this is something I want to emphasize here. So let me write this down as a timestamp, right? I think people are underestimating how big of a leap in storage tech this is for the consoles and then for the overall gaming industry. It's not like the consoles are going from, hard drives to solid state drives. They're going from hard drives to Gen 4 SSD, and in the case of Sony, most likely, a custom better than Gen 4 SSD. They're not going from hard drive to SSD. They're skipping SSD. They're going to the next thing, right? They're skipping an entire thing. It's a huge upgrade in storage tech. And when game engines are built around that type of performance, again, a lot of people are like, next gen, they're just going to load faster and games will look better. That's bullshit, right? I think there's an argument to be made that the type of games you could make could fundamentally change, especially with the case of the custom Gen 4 and the PS5. Again, we have to wait to see what it is. Like, you could fundamentally change how you render a game, right? With that type of speed. And people are really underestimating how big of a deal this is going to be. So the Switch straight up won't run those games is my point too. It's just not happening. And the processor isn't just better. We're talking about, forget the graphics card, which will probably be about 6 times better than the previous gen, at least in the case of the PS5. I don't want to get into it, but roughly speaking, right? The processor is going to be like 8-10 times better. So we're talking about, right? If a SATA SSD due to random read write is roughly 10 times better than a hard drive, which it certainly feels that much snappier, doesn't it? If not more than 10 times, by the way. If a standard hard drive's if a standard solid state drive is that much better than a standard hard drive, and then we're going to something 10 times better than that, like, you're just not running, and then you're putting that in conjunction with a 10 times better processor. You're just not running those old games, or you're not running these games on a last gen device. Like, it's just straight up not going to work. At least not after the first year. The first year, there will be this hybrid iteration, just like every new generation, where some games are for both, generations. But when you get games built from the ground up for this type of speed and this type of a processor, they're going to work fundamentally differently. When you really break it down, and actually I'll bring this up too, because this is an interesting discussion. I talked to someone who's a game engine dev, and he worked on the PS1, PS2, PS3, 360, PC games, and he talked about how you can really thank the and these are his words, not mine. You can thank the PS3 for those 8-thread i7s being used, because before that, everything was really programmed for 2 cores. The PS3 had like 7 cores, close enough to 8, and so they started programming PC games for 8 threads. Or at least for 6 threads, so you could run stuff on the background task. The 360 had 6 threads as well. It had 3 cores with hyperthreading. You can thank that for standardizing that type of threading. And well, on my 3950X, it's certainly using 12 of my 32 threads. It's not using more than that. It's like 12 threads at like 50% usage. And it's going to stay like that until you get 16 threads as the standard. And once that happens, the game engines are going to work differently. So I just really got to point that out. They need a new Switch, and I don't know if a new Nvidia SoC is strong enough. That's one thing I want to point out. Like, could they make a Turing-based SoC for a new souped-up Switch that's as strong as a PS4 Pro and a handheld? By the end of next year, probably. Or by the end of this year, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know its processor will be able to keep up. And that thing's going to need at least 8 gigabytes of RAM. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll nail it. And this is a whole thing. I could do a whole video about the Switch, to be honest, guys. Because I really do actually think the Switch could have been a little bit stronger and it would have lasted longer. But I think that about just about every Nintendo console. Anyways, though, I think we should move on from that question. All right. Essen writes in. And he says, for the Xbox Series X, how is Microsoft going to support Windows on it if the ARM chip is running the OS? Well, I'm going to cut you off right there. Again, guys, wait for questions. Another 5 minutes of this. I don't believe the Series X is going to run a background ARM chip. The Xbox One didn't. That's what the PlayStation's going to do, right? The PS4, I believe, launched with like half a gigabyte of DDR and an ARM quad core for use for background tasks and streaming. And the PS4 Pro upgraded it to a full, it may have even just been 256 megabytes. I don't remember. The PS4 Pro upgraded that to 1 gigabyte. And they use that 1 gigabyte of DDR3 or DDR4 or something and that quad core ARM for all background tasks and handling the streaming. Well, the Xbox just clocked the processor faster and reserved half of one of the cores for background tasks. It's a different implementation, but it makes sense when you think of Xbox, actually does use Windows. Even right now, the Xbox One runs a version of Windows Core, which means you don't want two processors for it to work, well. You want to just clock the processor faster than the PlayStation and reserve half of a core or one of the cores at launch, I believe, for background tasks. And that's what Microsoft did. It's just two different approaches. But Sony says, hey, this is our own custom OS. Who cares? We'll just have 4 gigabytes RAM and an ARM processor for background tasks. I do not believe the Xbox Series X is doing that. Could be wrong, though, but I don't think it will. So, and send me information if you've heard anything to the contrary, because I haven't. All right, last question before we get to Q&A. All right, Mr. writes in, and he says, more of a comment than a question. I'm surprised at this late date that I've heard no details at all regarding console and RDNA ray tracing implementation. Well, we've heard some things, all right, mister. But cheers to another great year of Moore's Law is Dead. Well, thank you for the cheers. Indeed, cheers to another year. But, yeah, I guess what I'll say to this is, when it comes to RDNA 2 ray tracing, we still don't know exactly how they're doing it. We believe they're reserving a part of the die for it. I don't think it's just brute force compute. And that's probably the method the Xbox is using. Oh, yeah, which I forgot to say before. So think of that, too. It makes sense why Sony might go with a custom FPGA or ASIC for ray tracing if they were using some other graphics card before. It's much easier to add another chip than to redesign the entire architecture that they plan to use. And I looked at a patent the other day it was a Sony filed patent by Mark Cerny, who is, the wonderkind of the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5, the architect of it, which is worth emphasizing because Sony doesn't just take off-the-shelf architectures. They custom designed the one in the PS4 Pro and the PS4. Again, that's its own video that I'm planning on doing. But based on that, it would make, I saw some customizations in the architecture that looked like it was built around running other architectures for backwards compatibility. So the PS3 used an Nvidia graphics card. It was based on the GT 7800, I believe, which was a high-end card at the time. But that explains why it's so hard to do PS3 backwards compatibility for Sony. Not only do they have to worry about the cell processor, but the Xbox 360, that used AMD. So it was easier to port between architectures. It fundamentally was. And with Sony, they had to deal with this NVIDIA outdated architecture. They had to deal with this cell. And so it looks like they put some customizations into the PS5's GPU to run PS3 games. And again, I do think it's going to have full backwards compatibility. If I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. But it's kind of like, it's even more so than Windows running on Xbox Series X, to be honest. It's common sense to me that the Series X should run Windows. It's common sense to me that the PS5 should have backwards compatibility all the way to the PS1. Just common sense to me. But yeah, so I'm not sure why we haven't heard that many details. I would assume that it means RDNA 2's ray tracing implementation is just more of an open standard, not fully brute force, but some modified version of asynchronous compute in one custom chip. And that's why we're not hearing tons about it. I could be wrong, though. I honestly don't have much to say about it at this stage. I am actually working on my Big Navi video now. I started it today. I should get it out next week. I'm sorry how long it's taken. There's been so many other videos I've been working on at the same time. And podcasts and this and that. So we'll see. My full conclusion on Big Navi basically isn't done. And it should be done by next week. So look for that. Okay, everybody, that is all of the reader mails. Let me put that down as a timestamp. Let me put this down here. 44 minutes, Q&A. Feel free to tip, and I will answer your question. Otherwise, I will just pull from what I find. Let me start at the beginning and make sure I didn't list any tips questions from the start, because I don't want to miss anybody here. So if I scroll down. All right, so there's that $11 question. This comes in from Keo9. Thank you for your tip. What do you think the new laptops with AMD will come? Wait, let me reword this here. What do you think the new laptops with AMD that will come out later this year? I think he's saying, what do I think of them? My Ryzen 5 Vega 8 graphics laptop from current gen. I know you did. I think he might be saying I didn't like that one Vega laptop I got from HP, but that's because it didn't work. So that'd be why I didn't like it. I wanted to like it. I know you did not. Will you leave cheap AMD? Will you leave for a cheap AMD? So here, I'm not quite sure what your question is, to be honest. It's worded a little weirdly, but I'll just give a quick spiel right now on Renoir. Look, it's not just Vega. They brought in new enhancements, and it's not just clock speed. At first, I thought it would just be clock speed. I mean, the APUs were running at about 1,200 megahertz before, and this new one was going to run close to 1,800 megahertz. So I'm like, yeah, so maybe that's why each compute unit is, 60% better than the other one. Except it seems there is a legitimate 20 to 30% IPC increase over Vega. I don't think that's quite to RDNA's level, but remember, Vega takes up less room than RDNA. It makes sense why AMD's using this for an APU, guys. Renoir is 150 millimeters square. The entire chip that should be about as strong as an RX 560 and a 3700X is smaller than an MX 1650. Think about that, guys. It's only twice as big as an MX 250, and that's how powerful it is. So they had to make sacrifices, and it takes time to merge newer architectures together. That's why their graphics architectures are always one step behind in the APUs, because then they need to spend the time basically merging two architectures together to get the most efficiency out of an APU. So I think it makes sense that they keep using Vega. Vega was very efficient in APUs. And with this IPC increase, clock speed increase from 7 nanometer, I mean, look, Vega 8, which I believe is the Vega in the 4800U, if that's an RX 560, that's PS4 base performance, maybe even better. And that's going to fit into like $800 laptops. Laptops like this that I've been able to get refurbished for $800, except instead of being an Xbox One, it's a PS4 or better. And that one should be, and the most important thing is the APU will be, as they've shown off, full 8 cores. And those full 8 cores, whether in the 8 cores, 8 threads, or 8 cores, 16 threads, right? The 4700U has 8 cores with no hyperthreading. That's enough that any AAA game should run. As long as your laptop has 16 gigs of RAM, you should be able to run most console games from next gen. Maybe they'll take longer to load. Maybe you'll have to turn settings to low. But the fact that it has a powerful processor means it should be able to keep up. So yeah, maybe the PS5 will run at 4K 60 Ultra. And maybe your 3080 Ti or Big Navi can run 5K, right? But your laptop can run the same game at 60 frames, except now it's 1080p. That is amazing, in my opinion. And I'm so excited for that in a laptop. That's what I got to say about Renoir. Most importantly, note this. The 4600U, 6 cores, 12 threads, 6 compute units, not 8. But that should be 3/4 as powerful, if not more, because they'll probably boost higher having less compute units. That should place it, if one of them is a 560, that should place it above an MX 350 in the budget version of Renoir in $500 laptops. That's awesome, right? Just below an RX 460. Again, right? In a 6-core 12-thread laptop, that should still run most AAA games from next gen, except now maybe it's 720p and you have to run it at 40 frames or something. But the fact that that can be in a $500 laptop, and a $500 laptop that has one 15-watt APU, not a 15-watt CPU and a 10-watt graphics card, not 25 watts, 15. So you could possibly game on it for like 5 hours straight on an airplane. I have nothing but excitement over Renoir. And I can't wait to see what they do with the Zen 3 RDNA 2.0 version. Maybe it'll be 1.0. We'll see. Probably a hybrid again. But that's my thoughts on Renoir. I would be waiting for it. I would be waiting for Renoir and Tiger Lake. If you get a good deal, okay. Like, let's say HP makes some version of this and you can get it from a refurbished version, except it has a 6-core i7 and an MX 1650 Max Q, and then you can get it for $700. That'd be worth it. That's a good deal. But it's not going to be as efficient as Renoir or Tiger Lake, and those are worth waiting for. And again, why I'm hyped up about Tiger Lake, double the graphics performance of Ice Lake, which Ice Lake's already about an MX 150. So what does that mean? Almost, about the same graphics performance, if not better than Renoir, it sounds like. And yes, only 4 cores, 8 threads, but it's supposed to have another 10% IPC increase over Ice Lake. So what are we talking about? 30% over Skylake total? I don't know. 4 cores, 30% higher IPC versus 8 cores. I think it might be able to hold up against some of Renoir. Probably not the best Renoir, but we'll see. Anyways, that's my thought on mobile. I hope I answered your question. I talked for a very, very long time. All right, the next question is from Adam Wilson. He says, I was going to ask about the possibility of an RDNA 2 video, but you already answered, so here's $5. Yep. And again, the way I'm structuring my RDNA 2.0 video is kind of a hindsight, like going through all of the leaks we've gotten for 3 years. We were getting RDNA leaks 3 years ago, and it reminds me of the hype Vega got. So I'm going to go through all of the leaks and kind of paint a story of what I think happened, because I think RDNA was one thing at first, and then they had problems. They had to change it. I've talked about this before on videos, but I'm going to go back through my previous RDNA videos, some of them that aren't public anymore, and other ones as well. And I'm pretty excited to do that. And so I can't tell you what my conclusion of Big Navi is yet, because this is probably going to be another giant video. And I hope I get it done this weekend because I'm traveling next week, but we'll see. Justin Parrish, will we see 6 or 8 core APUs in the 4000 series? Well, yeah, Renoir has 6 and 8 core APUs. It's a pretty easy question for me to answer. The only thing I'll add on to that is, I don't know with Zen 3 will limit it to that. I think they might still limit Zen 3 APUs to 8 cores just to make a smaller die, because why not? They don't need more than that in a laptop, I don't think. What I'm really curious about is their Jaguar successor. If they'll go to 6 cores with like no hyper-threading or something as standard in their budget, $400 laptops. Because that's, and again, I love the AM1 platform that had those like $40 quad cores from AMD, and it had a small graphics card on it, and you can get a $30 motherboard. That type of budget gaming, I'm excited to see what happens to that too, and I'm really curious to see how many cores and threads and what architecture that will be based on. It'll probably be 12 nanometer based, but they can sell, if they can sell a 6-core APU for like $50 based on 12 nanometer for netbooks and like $300 laptops, that's good. Again, it changes the game of the type of performance you can expect out of a budget laptop. And I'm so excited about these APUs. Hope I answered your question. The answer is really just yes. Well, now here's someone typing to me in Chinese. And if only we had access to the internet. Oh, look at that. We do. Let's see what he says. Am I Chinese? No. Fun fact, I actually took Chinese in middle school, but my parents signed me up for the wrong class. So yeah, that's something I can talk about in a Flyover States or another podcast at some point. That was it's a pretty funny story. Needless to say, I don't speak Chinese though, even though I almost tried to. What's my expected performance of mobile APUs in 2021 with 7 nanometer plus? Well, I think we have to be very distinct moving forward in what we're talking about when we say APUs, because the PS4 is an APU, right? That was like I don't even remember. What was the PS4 base, like 250 millimeter squared or something? I don't remember. That is technically an APU, way more powerful than usual. There's another Chinese console I'm aware of that's about the equivalent. It's launched like 4 years ago or something, and it had 8 gigabytes of GDR5. It ran full Windows, and it had a Zen 1 quad core with 8 threads, and yeah, like the equivalent of an RX 480. That was an APU, guys. custom made for the Chinese market. And it only had 8 gigabytes of GDR5 and it ran full Windows. For those wondering, like, how would an Xbox run full Windows? Well, they've already done it on GDR5 for another market. So, guys, they can do whatever the hell they want. GDR5 is just better than DDR4, first of all. Like, it's just better. So there's no problem running Windows out of GDR, whatever. But so when I say different classes of APUs, I say you got your, like, Atom-like Jaguar class. You should never expect more than last gen console performance at like 15, 25 watts. But if they can nail it for a good price, that's exciting. Then you got your standard APU performance, which is getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. You know, this is Renoir, where I'm like, holy shit, this is a 15-watt PS4 that has a 3700X processor. Where do I see that going next year? Well, Zen 3 should be quite a bit more efficient. You know, I would expect a 10, 20% IPC increase from Zen 3, a few other nifty enhancements we don't know about yet, and lower power usage for 8 cores. So yeah, I mean, you're looking at, for the processor end of it, what? Probably 9900K performance in an APU, or at least close. And then the graphics card, well, let's see. They get 20% density increase. They could probably make it a little bigger and use Navi. So see no reason why the graphics card couldn't be 50% bigger. Yeah. So I think you're looking at something around a 9900K with PS4 Pro gaming performance. What does that mean? Well, I mean, hell, a Zen 3 APU in next year, as long as the graphics card gets that powerful, it'll run AAA games from next gen. No, it won't run them as well as the PS5, but it'll run them in 15 watts and with ease. It'll run them with ease. That's what I think you can expect. I think you can expect, you know, RX 5500 plus 9900K performance in an APU late next year. Now that's the beefy ones, though, the beefy APUs from AMD. And then they could even make bigger ones. There's no reason AMD can't eventually scale up to like a 200 millimeter, maybe even 250 millimeter squared APU that can just barely fit on AM4 as long as they keep the clock speeds in control. If they did something like that, and they put one stack, which, remember, a stack of HBM2E actually goes up to 1536-bit because it can go up to 12 high stacks. Yeah. If they did a 12 high stack of HBM2E or a 12 high stack of HBM3, I mean, they could get to 5700 XT plus 3900X performance in a 300-watt APU, you know, late next year. But it wouldn't, you know, it would use 100 watts, 150 watts. They could do that, though, and I'm waiting for them to do that. You know, I'm wondering when that's going to happen because, you know, they're planning it at some point. But yes, let me write that down as a timestamp as well. PU. All right, let's see what else we got. Lost my place again. All right. Too Good for YouTube says, do you think a Switch 2 in 2 or 3 years could have enough flops in the same form factor? Again, teraflops, guys, I think people are getting obsessed with this with the PS5 and Xbox Series X. I think the Series X and the PS5 are going to have different architectures. And I don't just mean like the Xbox has RDNA 2.0 and the PS5 has RDNA 1.0. I've already seen a pattern where they're doing like completely custom optimizations for backwards compatibility and other types of features for, it's not going to just run RDNA 1.0. It's going to be a completely custom architecture for the PS5. And then I do actually just think the Xbox will just use RDNA 2.0. They tend to just use off-the-shelf architectures. But needless to say, the point is they're different architectures. They're different architectures. And you should not just look at the teraflops and say one's going to do this and this. And then also remember it's, yeah, again, so, but anyways, like the Switch did get from the PS4, is it technically possible? I don't know. Again, guys, I think it's less about the teraflops, right? Remember what I just said. Renoir should be about as strong as a little, maybe even a little stronger than a base PS4. You know, twice as good as an Xbox One. But its processor will have 8 cores, 16 threads, Zen 2. That should allow it to run the same games as next gen. Now, it won't be able to load them as fast, probably, but it'll be able to run them. That's what's important. I don't know what processor, what storage they're putting in the Switch that will allow it to keep up with the console at all. And let's talk about RAM. I'm pretty sure the PS5 is going to have at least 20 gigabytes. And I'm sure the Xbox Series X will have at least 16. So what are they going to do? Put 16 gigabytes in the Switch? Sounds expensive for Nintendo. I don't know. They could, maybe, but that's what you got to think about. I'm not as concerned about the teraflops. And this is something I've talked. Let me get into my spiel about the Switch. How much RAM does the Switch have? Isn't it like, I'll look. Switch, Nintendo, I think it's 3 gigabytes or 4 gigabytes. Amount of RAM. And I'm sure all of you are messaging me right now. 4 gigabytes. Okay. So my problem with the Switch and the Nvidia Shield, for that matter, is it should have had a little more RAM. 4 gigabytes, the reason they can barely fit The Witcher on and they have to like completely change sections of the game so it runs is it doesn't have enough RAM. The Switch should have had 6 gigabytes. 6 gigabytes is enough to keep up with the 8 gigabyte Xbox One and PS4. 6 gigabytes of RAM. The RAM should have not been 1600 megahertz or 1333. I don't remember which one it was. It should have had 2133 megahertz. 6 gigabytes, and the graphics card should have been clocked a little higher when docked. I think the processor should have been a little more powerful too. I don't really think that would have added that much to the cost. God knows that thing is dirt cheap to make. It wasn't like a 720p screen and 4 gigabytes of RAM. That thing should not be $300, you guys. Oh my God. They could have stomached the difference in cost to manufacture, I think, if they did that. And if they did, it's not like a matter of where you have devs just porting specific games to the Switch, and it's like, oh, we managed to fit Doom at 720p, 30 frames. Oh, we got The Witcher on it, except it doesn't load parts of the game, and the view distance is 10 feet, and it runs at 24 frames a second. I think they could have just ported every game. I think if they would have just had 6 gigabytes of RAM, a little faster, with a little stronger processor, yes, it would have run at lower resolutions. But I think they could have just ported every game. And that's what always annoys me about Nintendo is every console I've seen, whether it's the Wii U, should we do a video about it on my own as well, I feel like if they would have just tweaked a couple things in there, it could have kept up with the next gen enough to receive all third-party games. And I don't know, I just don't think Nintendo's as good at optimizing for performance as Sony, let alone, or even Microsoft. I just don't think they are. That's not what they're about. They're about the creativity, coming up with a good form factor. Sometimes they swing and miss, but sometimes they hit it out of the park, like with the Wii and the Switch. And that's what I would say about the Switch too. Is it's like, yeah. So let me write that down as a timestamp as well. Switch 2. I kind of like this though. I want to get all the console questions out here so we can focus on PC hardware in the next Broken Silicon, which will come out Wednesday. Me and Dan are recording it tomorrow. So I'm trying to get all the console questions out in this episode, basically. But yeah, that's what I think of the Switch too. I mean, I just don't know what they're going to put in it to make it keep up. And again, it's like, guys, I really think people are underestimating how much stronger the next gen consoles are going to be. And not just stronger in teraflops, like fundamentally better. I think of it like, so the PS4 and Xbox One solved the RAM problem and had a big enough hard drive to install all games. That was a big deal. That's why we saw so many open world games this gen, because now we could finally make them, right? You can make a game that looks like Killzone 2, or you can make a game like Mag or Skyrim. You can't do both. You couldn't do both on next gen. Skyrim looked all right, but it didn't look like Killzone. That was the problem last gen. Okay. Well, with this gen, they didn't have to choose. But at the same time, there really weren't games on... There were, right? Like, I don't think Red Dead Redemption 2 was possible on last gen at all. But fundamentally, most games were similar, just better and with less compromises. And the ease of use is something people underestimate with this gen of consoles. Go back and use a PS3. My God, that thing is fucking slow. Jesus Christ, it's terrible. But this gen, you boot it up. It updates games in the background. You can install your games. It was ease of use, better quality of life, and now we don't have to sacrifice graphics as much to make an open world game. That was the benefits of this gen. But most of the games are fundamentally the same, at least in the first half of the generation, I think. And that's why people complain about games not getting better. I think they are better now. But I admit the first half of this gen wasn't as impressive as the PS360 gen. The PS360 gen was a quantum leap in performance in every way measurable than the PS2, GameCube, Xbox. Like quantum leap. And that's what I think the PS5, especially in the Xbox Series X2, is going to do. It's going to be a quantum leap in storage. We're not going from hard drive to solid state. We're going from hard drive to Gen 4 SSD. We're skipping a step. Quantum leap in storage. We're not going from the base PS4 has 7 cores and then a background processor. The Xbox One base had 8 cores, but no background processor. We're going from that at like 1.7 gigahertz to 16 threads at 3.2 plus gigahertz with like double the IPC. That's a quantum leap in processor performance. In conjunction to the storage and a faster graphics card means the games we can make are going to be fundamentally different this time around, which really wasn't true with the PS3, which really wasn't true with the PS4 and Xbox One over the PS360. And that's why, again, it's like, you know, anyways, though, I think I got, all right, let's keep going. Woven Weaver says, when's the latest that Sony AMD could have redesigned the PS5 APU, and how much do you think it would have cost them to do the redesign? Well, I think I answered your question, but I'll reiterate it since you tipped me, and thank you for the tip. The point is this. I think that, and again, it's not 100% confirmed. Well, here's what I know for a fact. Sony was going for fast GDR6, a fast-clocked graphics card, Zen 2 at least, and a custom SSD since 2016 or 2017. I have information specifically about the solid-state drive. That thing was done years ago. But I think there's an argument to be made that potentially they saw ray tracing, they saw the graphics wall coming up, and then they saw the Xbox One X's performance, and they said, let's wait a year. Plus, our PlayStation 4 is selling well. Why do we need to get it out now? And so they delayed it a year, and I don't think they completely redesigned the APU. I think they just said, and again, this part of it's not confirmed. This is my speculation. I think they said, well, instead of 36 or 40 compute units, let's beef it up to 44. Let's clock it a little faster because it's coming out later. And then let's add a ray tracing chip. So there wasn't really that much of a redesign, was there, of the APU? They just said, let's clock it faster and add a few more compute units. And then they added a separate ray tracing chip and maybe used faster RAM. That's kind of what I think Sony did. I think we won't know for a month or so. Though I think their big reveal is the end of February, which we might do a broken cell con. Once we know the full specs of the Xbox Series X and the PS5, me and Dan might just do a broken cell con on only analyzing those two consoles because, again, I like computer hardware. And I don't know why people are pigeonholed and only looking at one thing. For me, console hardware is just as interesting. Anyways, Carbon Cry writes in, do you have any details on improvements of Vega 3 and Renoir? I don't have any specifics, but I do know that and you're calling it Vega 3 because it really is like, it's not RDNA, it's its own enhancements. What I do know from reading a few articles with interviews from AMD is that the enhancements to Vega 3, or what I call Renoir version of Vega, has enhancements outside of what they had in RDNA 1.0. And that's exciting because they've said that they're going to apply a lot of the enhancements they had in Vega 3 to RDNA 2.0. That's one reason why RDNA 2.0 may be so much more efficient is that, again, right, we know that they have this big lineup for RDNA, and then they hit power usage and scaling problems. And so they said, well, okay, we were going to go up to 64 compute units, but we've got this 40 compute unit version that works. So at least we don't have as many problems here. Although it seems like they might still have had some hardware bugs left in it, and they had to retap it out. But that's its own thing that Cortex needs to confirm. You know, they said, let's launch this. Let's overclock it. It won't be as efficient as we wanted it to be, but it'll work, and it'll compete with the 2070 and 2080, so who cares, right? And so they launched RDNA 1.0 as only the bottom half of their lineup, but it was overclocked. And I think they've been working on ways to fix the power usage and scaling issues, and they applied some of those to Vega 3, and they will apply those to RDNA 2.0. Again, from what all indications point to RDNA 2.0 being like a 290X moment where people underestimate it. Like everyone goes, 80 compute units, so what? Or even just 64 compute units, they might say, so it'll be only this much better. But no one expected the 290X to be more than a 300-watt version of the 7970. And in fact, it turned out to be like 50-60% better in 4K, and use only like 20-30% more energy while still being on 28 nanometer. I think that's probably what's going to happen with RDNA 2.0. One can only hope. But again, I'll be doing a video on it. That video might be really long. Justin Parrish. Sorry, meant to specify desktop APU for like STX systems. So yeah, I think I answered your question though, right? It all comes down to how big they want to make it. And there's evidence that they're working on something compatible for like Epic servers that, well, that's basically confirmed at this point, that they're making a mega APU that could be 250, right? So if they have like 280-watt Threadrippers, 280-watt Epic chips, there's no reason they couldn't make a 280-watt APU that leverages 8-channel memory, some stacked HBM3 on board, and, maybe not 64 cores, but, well, it could be if it's Zen 3, but, maybe like 48 cores. Like that's what they're working on. That server engineer said he knows they're working on it. Well, and it was in an interview that he sent me. So that type of thing is coming, though. And I mean, what type of performance could that have? I mean, what, right? I mean, we got 8, 9 chiplets in in Epic. I mean, I think, yeah, they could fit. They could fit something as strong as a Radeon 7 in a Threadripper package this big. They could fit a Radeon 7 level performance plus, a 48-core processor. They could do that. They could fit that into that package, and then you don't need to worry about anything. You just put this in there and you're done. But anyways, they don't have as many constraints anymore. So Michael Kerr writes in and he says, will gaming plateau at 4K Ultra $200 GPU price? I just think people talking about a plateau in performance are thinking short term because we don't know how big of a deal the game engines, the next gen way of doing things may be. Again, we're going from hard drives that are horrible random read write and IOPS performance, and like 500 mega, not even, right, like 100 megabytes per second read write, to, I don't know, the PS5 might have a dual host. It might be the equivalent of Gen 4 SSD RAID. So we're not talking about 10 times the speed, or even it might be like a 100 times or more. I'm not sure what you're going to do with that well that you can draw from to make games. I wouldn't be so sure. There's just entirely new things they'll do to use this performance for that aren't just graphics. And will gaming plateau at 4K Ultra? Well, it's funny. And this is something me and Cortex have talked about a lot recently. So, and this is part of the CRT madness going on, but like CRT and OLED fundamentally handle pixels and resolution differently. 1440p on my OLED TV looks almost as good as it looks better than 4K on an LCD for more than just the resolution reasons. But I'm saying 1440p on an OLED display looks almost as high res as 4K on an LCD display. So I think that's the question, right? I think 8K is where you completely plateau. But in conjunction with OLED and some of these new display techs coming out, like, what is it, micro LED and quantum micro LED, all these other things coming out now. I think there's this question of if we'll need more than 4K when we have OLED quality right in the pixels. And so we need to get there, though, to even show ultra. Like, honestly, if you're in 1080p right now, the difference between medium and ultra in a lot of the newest games is almost indistinguishable, besides maybe lighting, because you just don't have the pixel density to show the details. So we need to get to 4K. And I know people act like you don't. We need to. We need to get to 4K, or graphics have plateaued. We need to get to 4K to show the extra detail. And that's what next-gen consoles are going to do. And I think we're going to get to this place where I'm sure some next-gen games will be photorealistic or basically photorealistic. I do. I think we're going to get there. But I think it's going to be like the PS360 generation. If you go back and play Killzone 2, I mean, Digital Foundry, which I usually give them a ton of shit, but they did a good video on Killzone 2, how it holds up. I mean, it's in 720p, but otherwise the graphics, the lighting hold up. They were doing deferred rendering before Turing ever came out. but it was a corridor shooter. Sure as shit wasn't open world. So I think we're going to see closed small games like Heavy Rain and Detroit Become Human, maybe a Killzone-ish corridor shooter, you know, like something like Doom. That might get photorealistic next gen. Open world games, I don't think will be, but I think we'll get to the point where it's a smooth, buttery 60, and it still looks better than games do now. Think of it like Cyberpunk ultra graphics, smooth 60. And I think that's pretty much where open world games are going to plateau for a while, which is good because you're getting close to the uncanny valley there. And that's probably where we should plateau until we can get to something that can just max out 5K at higher settings. And we're not going to be there until probably, 3 nanometer graphics cards. That's my opinion. And what that means, though, is as they continue to die shrink graphics cards, yeah, I think eventually, in a couple of years, halfway through next gen, you'll have $200 cards that are not quite photorealistic, but, better than Titan RTX now and running every game buttery smooth, maybe with ray tracing. That's good. That's pretty damn good, right? It's not photorealistic, but it's just at that level where it's pretty close. I do think we'll get there in like 4 years for a $200 graphics card, which makes sense, right? By then the consoles will be cheaper, they'll be old, so okay. I don't think it's happening next year, though. Let me be clear about that. Okay, let me see. Make sure I'm not missing any questions. Jerry Watson writes in, and he says, what are your thoughts on AMD's annual report? Lisa Su was sharp on CN. Well, yeah, Lisa Su's always killing it. Man, when I saw her at Hot Chips, she was like, it's like, who's next? You got to quit. Like, she was there, man. She's an impressive person to see talking. She's got some big dick energy right now from how well AMD is doing. I'm just going to use that term. Lisa Su is sharp on CNBC. Her outline for 2020 is aggressive. Yeah, I don't have much to say about AMD's earnings. They're the same as always. They met expectations. The people trying to short AMD, for some reason, expect AMD to conquer the entire galaxy overnight. They're not going to, but their roadmap continues to be aggressive. And I just don't see this as a good year for Intel. And if Ampere really is coming out at the end of this year, I don't know. I think AMD looks good. I think Zen 3 is going to be in between Zen Plus and Zen 2 in an uplift, but that's a big uplift when your competition is half the efficiency. So that's what's going on over there. That should be just enough to make their low-end APUs outcompete some high-end competition from Intel laptops, which should destroy the laptop market. In fact, what it should allow is this. Here's something to think about that I've talked about on Broken Silicon. If right now the 15-watt Renoir, if right now Renoir uses 15 watts, let's say Zen 3 is like even 50%, I think it could double efficiency. Maybe not double performance, but double efficiency. Let's even just say it's 50% more efficient. Okay, so we got an 8-core Zen 2 Renoir that's 15 watts. Lakefield is 5 watts. I think Lakefield is very impressive. 5-core processor from Intel. Only 5 watts, almost desktop experience. All right, though. So if you have a 15-watt 8-core on Zen 2, if you go to Zen 3 and it becomes a 10-watt 8-core, if you go to Zen 3 and it becomes a 7 or 5-watt 6-core when it's cut down, you get to a situation where I wonder if cut down Zen 3 APUs could compete at the same efficiency as Lakefield. That's a problem for Intel. That's a problem. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just random thoughts I have. I think AMD looks pretty good. I don't see anything slowing them down this year. 2021's possibly a different story, especially if Nvidia doesn't take prisoners, which they shouldn't get cocky. They really shouldn't get cocky, in my opinion. But yeah, let me put that as a timestamp, right? All right, let me see here. AMD Financials. All right, let me keep scrolling. Make sure I don't miss my spot, miss anybody. Adam Wilson says no beer today. I'm drinking sake. No, sake's good, guys. I love hot sake. Trying to cut back on the beer a little bit. That's what's going on. Toner Inc. Hey, Toner Inc. I remember you. Writes in, looking forward, confirmed Big Knobby in consoles 2. I really think AMD has a secret master plan to rock the boat hard in GPU. So I don't know if I'd use the term master plan, but I do think I just don't think you should underestimate AMD in anything anymore. And I'd kind of say the same thing with Ampere. Like I don't, or in Nvidia. Like Nvidia has a lot of money in IP. Could Nvidia fuck up? Yes, of course they could. But I wouldn't underestimate them if they get aggressive. And the same goes for AMD. AMD is not low on money anymore. They're not quite rich yet, but look at what they did. You know, I just really don't think they should be underestimated. It's all about choices, how many resources they have, where they want to focus their resources. And the fact is they have way more resources right now. All right. So they just shouldn't be underestimated. I don't know if they have a secret master plan for Big Navi or their GPU roadmap, but you can bet they're planning some aggressive moves. Of course they are. Anyways, let's see what Bootman says here. Can you get all that money signed on optimized games in DLC? Bootman didn't tip me, but I know he's a long-time, big-time patron. And he's just talking about how can EA get all that money selling non-optimized games? Well, you know, Battlefield's one of the most optimized games I've ever played, so I don't agree there. DICE knows what they're doing when it comes to building engines and stuff, at least for their games. I know that their engine was a big problem for Mass Effect Andromeda. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I exactly get your question. But maybe type it again down below if you have more specific thoughts. All right. Is that all the questions? I thought, oh, no, there's another one here. I was going to say, I knew I missed someone. All right. Doran Edwards writes in and says, have a 3700. Okay. So you have a 3700X, 32 gigabytes of RAM, a 1080 Ti in my computer. What GPU should I be looking to next for 1440p, 144 hertz AAA gaming? I mean, what's the rush? Isn't that card running 1440p well? My Radeon 7, I got to say, which is a different card, to be fair. And it's, you know, aged a little better because it has the compute chops and it's Vega, the fine wine bullshit. So, but like, I'll just speak for my card, which overclocked has like 1.1 terabytes per second of bandwidth. Like, I just got Sniper Elite 4 to play with Dan in co-op, which is a great game. If you want to play with a buddy, it's a good game for that. It was like $10. And it's funny, just like Battlefield, I can run a resolution scale increase and there's literally no performance penalty, which I find interesting, right? I can literally run it at like 40% higher than 1080p resolution upscale. And it's just like, it like literally doesn't affect frame rate, telling you how much extra bandwidth Radeon 7 has. You know, so I don't know what the situation is for your 1080 Ti, but I imagine it's fine. And I'd wait. I would really wait. I think Big Navi is going to be there for people who want a high-end PC and are going to use it for professional work. But I think, you know, you wait till after the consoles come out. I think AMD is going to refresh their entire lineup. If I had to guess, they're going to keep making the 5700 on 7nm non-EUV, but they'll refresh it with faster clock speeds, you know, maybe 15, 16 gigabit per second memory. So that's like a 15, 20% increase in bandwidth. You know, and then they'll drop the price to $300, and then they'll bring out like a $450, $500 5800 XT, a $600 5900 X, you know, all that type of stuff. And I think that stuff's also going to drop in price over time too. So I don't know. And I gotta say, it's like you got a PC and it works. Your processor's fine. I wouldn't touch the processor for a while. Wait for a Zen 3 on sale upgrade late 2021. After Zen 3 comes out, when it's dirt cheap like the 2700X is, just upgrade that. You got nothing to worry about, man. That 1080 Ti should keep working fine for another year. I mean, it'll work for years and years, actually, but like it shouldn't have, you know, whatever. And then just wait for something really powerful to come out. Like, because whatever comes out after RDNA 2.0, I think is going to be a home run as well. And if you want the fastest load times and the ease of use, I don't think you should ignore the next-gen consoles. I don't know why people insist on only gaming on console, only gaming on PC. I don't know. Hope I answered your question. I mean, I guess let me add one more thing because I want to make sure I'm not ignoring your overall point, though. Like, so if you're someone who paid $700 to $800 for a 1080 Ti, I assume you want to buy a high-end card. Yeah, then I say you're still waiting for big Ampere or a 5900 XT, and we'll see what happens. AMD said, and I'll say this in my RDNA 2.0 video, that they're going to do disruptive 4K performance. Disruptive 4K? The only other graphics card I can think of that had disruptive 4K performance was the 290X. Because I know it only ran games at 30 to 40 frames in 4K Ultra, but at the time, every other card was running them 20 frames. Everyone forgets that the 290X will roughly 30 to 50% better than the 7970 and most resolutions in games people are using. In 4K, it was like 70% better. It changed the game. It was the first time you could actually run 4K, frankly. And so with that in mind, I don't think anything is just. I think, look, man, you can run a game in I can, on my Radeon 7, I play Sekiro in 4K Ultra. It's fine. HDR turned on my TV. It's fine. So disruptive 4K to me means 120 hertz 4K gaming for $600 or less. Maybe 700. I guess 700, 750. So that's what I think you should expect. If you were willing to spend $700 on the 1080 Ti, you're probably willing to spend $750 on something twice as powerful from Big Navi, assuming it's that good. We'll see. But that's what I think you should be waiting for, you know? I mean, yeah. Yeah, and I know people talk about like, well, you know, I had a 980 Ti, and you know, you'll have people attack you and go, well, the 5700 XTs, you know, whatever, 50, 40%, I don't know what it exactly is, better than a 980 Ti. It's like, yeah, but someone who bought a 980 Ti is willing to spend $700. Someone who bought a 980 Ti wants the best. The reason someone with a 980 Ti is probably still waiting to upgrade is because they don't want to spend $1,200 or $400 for something that's 30% better. If you have an overclocked 980 Ti, especially if it was a good overclocker, that thing got pretty close to a 1080 when overclocked. So like, you know, so that's my point though. If you're someone with a 1080 Ti, you probably want to spend $750 for something that's not just better, but way better. And that's what I think you should wait for. And it could be Big Navi, it could be Ampere, but we don't know yet. And as long as your games work, just turn settings down to high, man. You're not in 4K. You won't notice the difference in 1440p with most games. So just do that. Well, and I know you say frames dip 60 to 40, but to 80, but I don't know which games you're playing. Hope I answered that. There's a lot of rambling. Sorry about that, guys. You write that down as a timestamp. Okay. All right. Next question. Scrolling. Come on. Where's? I don't know why I always have to do the scroll all the way down, then scroll back up to not miss questions. Michael Kerr writes in. He says, SLI Crossfire coming back with PCIe 5.0. I don't know. I mean, the next gen consoles aren't using Crossfire, so for now, I just don't think so. I think halfway through next gen, though, we might see Crossfire make a comeback. You're going to need to wait for all games to be running on DirectX 12 and Vulkan. And halfway through next gen, they should be. Once that happens, supposedly, we'll see if it actually works in practice, but supposedly, DirectX 12 should just allow the engine to run multi-GPU on its own, divvying up resources. And that's the dream, right? I don't want this, oh, some games get 100% scaling with Crossfire, some games get 40%, and some games don't work. I don't even need 100% scaling. I want every game to get 60%. Bar none, every game I run. If you could get that with Crossfire and then the devs don't have to program for it because it runs DirectX 12, then I think it could make a comeback. But until that happens, I don't know. I just wouldn't worry about it right now. And, you know, the fact of the matter is it seems like you don't even need to plan for, AMD and Nvidia don't even need to plan for it. Like the Radeon 7 doesn't support Crossfire, but you can do multi-GPU in some DirectX 12 games. Same with some Turing graphics cards that, like a 2070, I don't believe supports SLI. But if you have DirectX 12, you can just force it to work. I mean, there's been tests I've seen where they force an AMD and an Nvidia graphics card to run a DirectX 12 game. They didn't have to program for it. It just knows how to, because that's how DirectX 12, that's how Vulkan supposedly works. So I think that's what we got to wait for. And I think now is just the dark period where no one uses multi-GPU, but eventually it might become a very real thing again. But not right now. So I just wouldn't worry about it. All right, let's see. Diamond Black Exteriors writes in and says, I have a question about HDMI 2.1 LG C9 OLED 120 Hz 4K sync support. It's my TV there. Do you think if next-gen NVIDIA cards are able to support HDMI 2.1, well, I assume they will. They should support it. I'll be able to take advantage of my 120 Hz 4K gaming TV. My 2080 Ti doesn't. Well, mine does. My Radeon 7 takes full advantage of that TV. I don't know if NVIDIA supports FreeSync over HDMI yet, though, but AMD has for a while. I plug in my Radeon 7. Guess what? 120 hertz, 1440p, HDR, locked gaming. And it looks fine on an OLED because the scaling's different. Again, remember, OLED isn't like LCD. 1440p scales up into 4K way better on an OLED display. I mean, I think I'm taking full advantage of it. 2080 Ti isn't running 120 hertz 4K anyways, so I think you should be fine with 1440p 120 hertz for now anyways, right? I don't know. That's my opinion on that whole situation. Now, will Ampere be able to do this? Hey, look, I think Ampere is going to have 50% higher compute performance and more RAM. You know, yeah, I think it'll get pretty close to 120 hertz 4K gaming. I do. And again, there's always a few settings you can turn down to get there. So yeah, I think you'll be able to. I hope that answers your question. I think you will be able to. I saw someone before say that TV doesn't have DisplayPort. So what? It has HDMI 2.1, can support up to 10K. Of course, it's not a 10K display, but HDMI 2.1 goes up to 10K 120 hertz. So it's fine. Okay, let me see here. Michael Kerr says, when do you see the PC laptop market slowing down, just like the smartphone market? Well, I think there are several factors that go into when a market slows down, right? Everyone was predicting the desktop, the laptop market to collapse for years. And, you know, Intel's like, we're preparing for a downturn. I wonder why. Everyone just assumed it was because people were fine with their PCs. But I don't know. Here's an idea. Maybe it was because Intel kept selling the same stupid-ass quad cores year after year, and no one wanted to upgrade because of that. Maybe. Notice how Intel has capacity problems now for two reasons. One, because of the performance losses of their server chips, so they need to make more chips to compensate for the performance loss, which is what a lot of servers are doing right now. They don't have time to program for AMD. They're just doubling the size of their servers to make up for the performance losses from security problems, which, you know, a new security problem just came out for Skylake and later. Glad I have a 3950X now, by the way. But notice that, right? Like, I mean, I think PC laptop might slow down, but it might not with how much better things are getting. All it took was AMD to make better products than what you could buy before and Intel to try to match them. And all of a sudden, everyone's buying new PCs. That's why. And I think it's kind of the inverse, though, for smartphones. If smartphones are going to continue to get more expensive and not do anything new, then no one's going to buy them. That's why the smartphone market's slowing down, because $1,100 phones. I think my phone, which was top of the line at the time from Sony, it's I don't remember which one it was, like an XZ3 Premium or something. Like the $700 unlocked from Taiwan, which I always get on Amazon unlocked phones from like Taiwan or Singapore because they're just half the price they are in the US for some reason. But like I just got that because my old phone broke, and that's $700. There's no way I'm spending more than that on a phone. And when am I going to upgrade this phone? When it breaks, when it starts to look like it's about to break. That might be a year from now, might be 2 years. And I think that's what most people are doing with their smartphones now. I think people use their phones every day, every hour. They drop them. They spill things on them. They're constantly in use. So when people complain that phones break, it's like, well, yeah, you're constantly using it. It's in your pocket. It's being dropped on concrete. There's a reason phones break every 2 years. You're constantly using them, unlike a laptop. So I think people just run their phones into the ground and then upgrade. And that's what's slowing down that market. But if phones did something fundamentally new, the smartphone market would pick up again. And things are changing in the desktop. And so once you see desktops and laptops stagnate again, that's when it'll slow down. And I think it's just that simple. Why was the desktop market stagnating and Intel was just blaming it on people happy with their PCs? Because they kept selling fucking quad cores with hard drives for too long. The second there was competition, though, everyone started upgrading. Look at that. What a surprise, right? Anyways, that's my opinion. Hope I answered your question. All right, next one. Human Being from Canada tips in, which tech news channels make the worst analysis? I don't want to call out specific channels. There's a couple I've watched. There was one channel that was an Xbox channel that turned into a PlayStation fanboy channel, and half of his shit is stupid. I don't know. The PC gaming news channels that annoy me the most are ones that just shove out information and don't respect your time. And I just updated my Patreon page to reflect a new mission statement, and that's I respect your time. Why is there a news broken silicon every 2 weeks instead of every week? It's because I think it takes 2 weeks for there to be enough news stories for me and Dan to prepare adequately to have a 2-hour podcast that's really well done, where every story is something you want us to talk about. I'm not just going to rush out a video that's about like new AMD drivers, one new BIOS leak for an Ampere card. No. When I do a video about Ampere, I want it to be 15 to 30 minutes long and cover several leaks at once, and it to be really interesting. And it does annoy me when tech tubers just rush out shit every day. And I stopped clicking on them myself because, it's like I'll notice half of their videos weren't talking about anything. And if all you do is put clickbaity titles like, Lisa Su leaving AMD exclusive. If you put exclusive in every YouTube title and rush out everything without taking time to properly edit your video, make it funny, make it interesting, and that's what annoys me. But I'm not going to specifically call out channels and shit on them. I don't feel like doing that. All right, let me continue. Judd Y says, great stuff as usual. Thank you. Merci, mon ami. All right, what else do we got? I think that's it then. I think that's it for the tips right now. I'll keep going for, well, as you know, I don't go for 2 hours. I'll give this another 10 minutes. Yeah, I think that's about all I got left in me. This is I'm almost out of sake. I'm getting tired. Got to make dinner soon. I skipped lunch, so, and eventually I'll have to go to the bathroom. So let's give it another 10 minutes. If you got any last minute questions, tip those in there, fill them up. How much VRAM do I think Big Navi will have? What are you talking about? Professional cards, consumer cards. Again, I haven't finished my Big Navi video, so I need to relook at the information I have. Some of it is from sources, and I think there's room for a lot of options. Actually, I think there's room for AMD to make several dies. I think there's room to make like a 56 compute unit 5800 XT that runs. Well, it could, I don't know. It could be 256-bit again, and then they just give it 16 gigabyte per second memory, right? And they give it, 56 over 40, so 40% more compute units, but then they give it 25% faster memory, and then they have an 8 gigabyte version and a 16 gigabyte version. 5800 XT, maybe 16 gigabytes for 550. They could do that. And I also think the top die might be 80 compute units. It might be. And it might have a, 3096-bit or 4096-bit or 2048-bit HBM2E interface. And then on the same die, a 256-bit interface. Why would they do that? And I've explained this a million times in videos and podcasts. But why would they waste die space on that? Well, if it used GDR6, Big Navi might use 400 watts if it's 80 compute units. But if you have the very top yields, use HBM2, well, now it becomes 350 watts, 320 watts. Then you cut that down, and for the less efficient yields, use HBM again. Then you can even cut it down further to, let's say, 56 compute units and give it a 256-bit, 18 gigabit per second memory. And yeah, that would be enough. That's why they would do both. So they can just make one die for like 4 different segments. And then, yes, I think there will be a professional card that's like, I don't know, right? Some insane situation where it might have like 32 gigabytes of HBM2 and like, I don't know, some insane like 64 gigabytes, 128 gigabytes of GDR6 or something. I don't know. Again, don't quote me on those numbers. Or maybe it's 16 gigabytes of HBM2E. And then they have, 96, 64 gigabytes, it'd be 64 gigabytes of GDR6. That'd be good for professional users. They're not bringing that to gamers unless they charge like $3,000, I don't think. But that'd be a professional card that's hard to compete with for, large data sets. Thoughts on, let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Thoughts on, oh, wow, there's a lot of questions that just showed up here. Thoughts on SpaceX Starlink versus cable ISP versus fiber. I don't have thoughts on that. I'm just going to be honest, Michael Kerr. I don't have thoughts on that. Yeah, I mean, eventually we're going to have fundamentally different ways of sending internet information, though, because eventually the speed of light just might not be fast enough, especially over long cables. But we'll see. Again, I don't want to put a big Navi info there. Software optimization getting worse. Okay, so Bootman writes in, software optimization getting worse because hardware getting better. I think it's the other way around. I think that happened for a while. I think that was the problem with how good Sandy Bridge through Skylake was. I think it was so much more powerful in IPC that devs were just getting away with using a few cores still. And that started to change around Skylake, where I stopped recommending i5s because 4 threads wasn't enough unless you just used an i3, right? That's what I decided then. You want a 4-thread i3 or an 8-thread i7 because, that i5 is going to age just as badly as the i3 is, or pretty close, I thought. And or at the very least, they're both going to stop running 60 frames at the same time. So I think that's what happened. I think devs got lazy with that. And maybe a little bit of the graphics cards too, because they were just so much more powerful than the PS4 for a while. But now optimizations are starting to catch up, I think. So games out sooner and getting patched later while selling for full price. Yeah. Still love your stuff. I'm glad you still love it, Bootman. I try to do better. I feel like the quality just continues to get better. It's funny if you go to my playlist that's like best videos and like half of them are from the past 3 months. It's like, yeah, my quality has just been like insanely better compared to the first 8 months, way more consistent too. Carbon Cry writes in, some change so you don't need to skip lunches. I was just too busy today. Also, I ate and drank way too much last night, so it's like I needed to punish myself a little bit. All right, Kyo9 writes in, do you see... All right, I'm going to take my time with this one. Do you see a teach price drop this year across the board, GPU, CPU? I see what you're saying. Is there going to be like a price cliff? I think SSDs are just going to get cheaper. That's why next-gen consoles are using them. I think the 2700X and the 1600 AF version, the 12 nanometer 1600, are just going to be hard to beat. The 1600 won't be as good as next-gen consoles, the 12 nanometer version, but it'll be good enough to where you'll run next-gen games as long as you're not running background tasks. The 2700X should just barely keep up with the next-gen consoles. No, it's not Zen 2, but it's clocked at 4 gigahertz, and the next-gen consoles are going to be like 3.2 to 3.8, I think. So that should be just enough clock speed to run the same AAA games, that the next-gen consoles are, at least for a few years. So those are going to continue to get cheaper, and I think eventually what's going to happen is they'll bring out the Renoir desktop versions of APUs, and those will become dirt cheap, Yeah, I don't know. I could almost see a situation, though, where I wonder, I think what they might end up doing is you're just going to see more and more staggered launches of different tiers of processors, right? So right now, the way AMD is competing with i3s and Pentiums is continuing to make Zen Plus processors. $80, 6 cores, $120 to $150 8-core 2700Xs, and they're made at Global Foundries, so there's no capacity problems. Doesn't matter how many they sell, they can keep spitting them out. I think that's going to be their strategy, and they're going to move that down eventually, right? Whether it's with a Jaguar replacement or just the same chips as always, to like $60 1600s, $100 2700Xs. What's going to follow suit after that? I think they might just keep making 3800Xs, right? One 8-core chiplet that got like 90%, 95% yields in 7 nanometer now, and one IO die. And I think they just might start selling those 8-core 30. So that might be their tiers, right? They might go like $60 to $80, 1600, $100, 2700X, and eventually $150, $180, 3800X. And then above that will be Zen 3. That's kind of what I expect to happen for CPU. So I answered SSD, I answered CPU. I don't know. I think motherboards will get a bit cheaper this year. And I think RAM, I don't know. RAM's a mixed bag because it's almost a commodity. It's like a commodity at this point. So it depends on who's buying what. But I think RAM's going to get a bit cheaper. I just do think it's going to get cheaper over time, guys. Maybe not drastically. And there may be bumps where it goes up in price. But I think it's going to get cheaper moving forward. Now, let me see. Is that everything? All the reader mails. Okay. All right, we got 5 more minutes here. Any last minute questions? Oof, yeah, I'm getting hungry. Ow. Let's see. Did you see the Ryzen R5 3600 at 150 at Micro Center? I didn't. You see, I think that's what they're going to do. The reason I think they're going to move the 3800X, though, not the 3600 to 150 long term. Remember, I mean long term. So I mean like end of this year, early next year. Why do I think it's $80, 1600, $120, 2700, $180, 3800X? It's because their yields at 7 nanometer are above 90%. So by the end of this year, they should be to 12 nanometer yield levels. At that point, there's no point in making a 3600X. Just start spitting out 3800Xs once it matures. That's kind of what I think they're going to do. Now, they might keep making 3600s and such, but I don't know. I think it just makes sense. I've long said that 2700X and the 3600 are roughly the same. 3600 in current games is maybe 10 to 20% better in gaming. Although some AAA games, the 2700X actually wins. People forget that the 2700X was only 20% behind the 9900K at most, usually 10%. So I just think they're interchangeable. And I think why make a $150 3600 long term when you can just keep spitting out $120 2700Xs? That's what I think. I mean, you're basically getting a console CPU, which is nothing to snuff at this time around, for $100. Just keep making those. Bladida writes in, how's your 3950X treating you? Yeah, so the 3950X script for the review is done. It's been done for a week, and there's just too much to work on. And I'm going to Fort Wayne for business all next week. So I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to get the 3950X review. I'm hoping I can get it out within a couple weeks. It's not been a priority for me, though. Like that Alder Lake video, that was exclusive source information. That's way more important. And you can just go to Hardware Unboxed for the graphs of the 3950X. How's it treating me, though? It's a monster. It's quiet. It uses less energy than my 6700K. And yet I can render and play Battlefield 5 with 20 Chrome tabs open at the same time. And it's like 50% usage. And it does get to 80% usage briefly sometimes when it's leveraging the Gen 4 SSD to load games. Battlefield 5 actually does use the Gen 4 SSD a little bit. And you'll see it spike to 80% every now and then. And it just insta-loads. It's incredible. I don't know. Any new hardware you're looking at for 2020? Nope. No, I don't give a shit about Big Navi. I want my Radeon 7. I use it for rendering. Yeah, what hardware am I looking at for 2020? The PS5. To be honest, especially as I get more busy. Like if the PS5 actually works well, which we'll have to see, right? Who knows if they fuck it up. But if it actually runs well, the fact that it can update my games in the background and it might have instant load times, dude, on PC right now, it's becoming a problem. Like if I want to so I just got Call of Duty Infinite Warfare for PS4, and it was $7. It's not that cheap on PC, guys. So the prices are about the same for games at times. And if I wanted to get the new Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, on PC, I check Steam. It's not on Steam. It's on this fucking BattleNet store. So what? So now I need the Epic Game Store. I need the Battle.net store. Bethesda's got their own bullshit. Uplay, Origin, Steam. Fuck it. I don't have time for this. And it's starting to really bother me because PC used to be easier than at least the PS3 generation. You know, that's when I got into PC gaming big time. I actually gamed on PC before console, but, you know, and it's just so hard to watch. And I'm an account manager. I work like 50 to 60-hour weeks sometimes, and then I work all weekend making videos and podcasts for you guys. I don't have time to download some stupid update, figure out which store I'm going to buy this game from that has DRM on it. I want to buy the game, put it in, and play. And if the PS5 does that better than PC, I'll just be gaming on PS5 most of the time, it looks like. And it's not because I want to or don't want to. Actually, I don't care where I play my games. But it's better. And we have to admit that right now on PC, there's like 10 stores, and it's really annoying, and it's not cheaper anymore. Like, what the fuck's going on? PC's more expensive all of a sudden. And my Radeon 7 and 3950X with a Gen 4 SSD are certainly going to run any game for the next 10 years. So if there's an exclusive to PC, I don't need to run it at the highest settings. I've got a good PC. That's my opinion on what's going on in 2020, by the way. I'll be honest with you guys. Just like what they say on H3H3, this is the end of the podcast. No one's listening. So I can be honest that I like the PS5 with you guys. All right. Kaio9 writes in, will you do podcast with a game engine or someone in software space? Yes. I'm not going to announce it yet because it's not locked in, but I have someone who's worked on game engines. Finally, that's what I've been looking for. And I'm looking for another one too, because I think that's, especially if it was like a Xbox dev or a PlayStation dev, I think that would be really interesting to talk to those people. I had one game engine dev talk to me about the PS3 era for a long time, but he said he didn't want to go on a podcast for anonymity reasons, even if I had the voice modulator and I didn't use his name. It's unfortunate, but that's what he said. So yeah, and hey, if you guys know anyone who works at DICE, who works at, you know, any of these game studios and is willing to speak candidly, tell me. You know, I'm looking for more guests. I've got another guest already recorded. I've got the next script with Dan I'm going to record tomorrow. And I've got another guest lined up who is a game engine person. And some of you will know who he is, but I'm not going to announce it yet for April. But in between, yeah, if you guys got guests, tell them to reach out, you know. All right, let's see. Sid Live says, why are Intel CPUs more vulnerable to security breaches than AMD from an architecture perspective? Well, I've talked about this a million times. I don't want to dwell on it. It's because I think Intel allowed them to rot. If you have the same architecture for 10 years straight, people will find weaknesses. It's the same with mechanical stuff too. Like if you have a safe that's really old from the 1800s, no one knew how to hack it back then. But like this thing's been taken apart a million times in a million places. A good locksmith just literally might know a trick of like hitting it in the right spot, listening for the right click, and then getting it open. Humans are smart. You give them enough time with any piece of hardware, they'll find a weakness. And that's the problem. Intel planned to get to Ice Lake in like 2016, 2017. And it would have been really good, right? And I think it was supposed to have 6 cores originally, and it would have had the same 20% IPC increase that they planned. Imagine if they got that out in 2017, like when Zen 1 came out. Yes, AMD would have had more cores, but if Intel had like a 20% higher IPC 6 core at that time, they would have killed Zen 1. So that's why they kept doubling down, but it just never panned out for them. And so 14 nanometer has been forced to be used way too long, the same architecture, and it's showing. And there's other things too, but I don't want to get into it. If you listen to all my other stuff, you know, but that's my biggest thing I take away with is just allowing an architecture to rot. You know, and they made a lot of shortcuts with hyperthreading too. Hyperthreading wasn't on the original iteration of what, I mean, we're going all the way back to like Pentium Day architecture base levels here. And they didn't have hyperthreading. So they kind of bolted on hyperthreading later, and that's going to have some weaknesses. But yeah, so that's my answer in a minute. Can you talk to someone who works on AI? It's scary. You know, I'm not that as worried about AI right now. So I'm not going to talk about it too. That's what I would say right now is I don't think you have much to worry about in the short term. That's my opinion. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, I wouldn't have said that, by the way. But I think what we think of as AI might not be what we think it is for now. But yeah, I mean, if there was an AI person available, I'd have him on. All right, I think that's it. I thought I was going to get a bunch of coronavirus questions, to be honest. A bunch of people in the Discord were bringing that up, but I guess not. I guess no coronavirus questions. I'll probably touch on it in the next flyover states, though. What's this here? All right, I think. Let's see. Well, Intel. So, Agent 2, I'll answer this question. Will Intel skip PCIe 4.0 and jump to PCIe 5.0 with Alder Lake? Or guys, watch Whispers of Alder Lake. Watch Whispers of Golden Cove. They're going to PCIe 4.0 with Tiger Lake, which is Willow Cove, and they're going to 5.0 with Golden Cove, Alder Lake. They're not fucking around anymore. They think they messed up, from what I'm told from people who work at Intel, by not going to 4.0 sooner. I mean, if you really break it down, KB Lake should have had Gen 4 SSD support, but it didn't, and they screwed up. There's no reason they shouldn't have had it at least by Coffee Lake. There's no reason, and they really effed up there. I keep getting unsubscribed from flyover states. I noticed that some people unsubscribed recently. I do think YouTube sometimes unsubscribes you from channels. So that's just a reminder. Guys, subscribe to Broken Silicon, subscribe to flyover states if you want to. Double check it, right? Because it does. And I've been unsubscribed from channels. I've noticed it. Talk about Google's face recognition. I don't think I have time to. When will we have the next forum comp? When I get the inspiration. I'll do more forum comps. That's why I invented that series, just so that when I just want to look at the forums, I can make a video that's fun. Yeah, I've seen the trailer for Half-Life Alyx. It looks amazing. Hope they bring that to PS5 so I can use my wireless 4K 120 hertz thing. Yeah, I don't know why YouTube doesn't notify you. All I can say is if you like my content, check the channel. Check the channel every week, and there'll always be new content. But yeah, so I'm getting off. You can tell I'm rambling. You can tell I'm tired. And YouTube fucks up the video stream for a few hours if I don't stop before 2 hours is hit. So do I think VR will be big this decade? Yes. And I think Xbox not supporting it could be a massive mistake. I think people are underestimating the PS5's wireless 4K capabilities, wireless VR capabilities. Again, that's a whole other video and discussion, but listen to the network engineer Broken Silicon. The network engineer Broken Silicon is, we talk about VR a lot. He knows a lot about it. And also, when will I do another solo Broken Silicon? Probably not for a while. I try to have guests on every episode. But if you like solo stuff, listen to Flyover States. And subscribe to the $4, the Unlocked Fourth Core channel. Hits and Gems, the first episode comes out tomorrow. Hits and Gems. If you like the solo Broken Silicons where I really dive into like old things, that's what that exclusive podcast is for. So again, this is only possible because of patrons. Oh yeah, by the way, like my YouTube funding has been cut in half the past month. There's like a mini apocalypse going on. I don't know what's going on. Patrons are the only people making this possible. That's it. And I don't want to be beholden to advertisers. So if you have the extra money, only if you do, consider supporting me on Patreon. Check out the Patreon now, right now too, please, because I added more information. There's now 3 exclusive podcasts, tons of extra content at the $4 level. $2 level lets you vote on the next Die Shrinks, listen to Die Shrink, ask questions of guests. Yeah, let me see any other things I want to comment on. Anyways, I'm out. I got to stop this before it hits 2 hours. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for the false starts over and over. Yeah, I don't know what was going on. I guess I might just use this cheaper camera every live stream from now on because I don't know what the hell that was. All right, consider supporting me. Tell me if Dan is okay. Suggest guests to me. Don't go fuck yourselves. Hug your dogs. All right, have a good weekend, everybody.